Hi, my name is Dan, and this video is one in a series of videos that I'm doing on crafting systems in video games, which is part of a wider suite of videos about the design of video games and game design topics. So the focus here is on budding designers who want to learn about game design and maybe incorporate these ideas into your own projects, either fantasy projects where you just create the ideas or real projects where you actually create the game as well. And in this one, I've wanted to particularly focus on the grinding elements of crafting. So grinding is a thing that has negative connotations to it and can be used in different ways. Grinding is yeah, okay, I feel the need to explain it, although I'm sure if you're watching this, you understand what grind is. But grinding is when you do repetitive tasks in games that may take you quite a long time to get through to achieve an end, to achieve something in the end. Sometimes it's thought of as being a negative part of games. And there are good reasons for this because grinding is less interesting potentially than some other parts of games. And also there have been links drawn between game addiction and grinding. And there are things that suggest that one of the worst areas in games for addiction is the area of grinds, where you're trying to achieve something, particularly if you've got rare drops and you're just trying to kill the same thing over and over and over again, trying to get that rare drop. And the problem there is why this becomes problematic is that you're not having fun anymore. And when you get into a grind that's no fun, you're losing the fun out of your game. So this, I'm not going to advocate the idea that you should absolutely get rid of all elements of grinding from games, but I think that a good game designer takes control of these things and so will control the grind. So a good game designer knows the effect of the design decisions that they've made on the player, knows what they're trying to get the player to do, knows which bits of the game hopefully are fun. And you do have players who are their own worst enemies in that if you give them the opportunity to grind, they will, and then they will complain that the game's not fun. And it's been their own choice potentially to do that. But sometimes it's good to do the player a favour and actually help them avoid the things that are going to put them off a game, like grinding, potentially. So I'm going to present here a few thoughts about ways to control grinding within games. So the first one is to have variety, and one of the worst things about grinding is if you're trying to get 1,000 of the same thing, because that's what you need to get towards your final output, and that makes it dull when it's all the same thing. So mixing up your materials, mixing up your items, making it so that even if the player has got quite a lot of work to do to get towards their super duper piece of shiny armor that they're trying to make, that actually the variety of the things that they need to do in order to gather the materials is good. One thing that I maybe could have said before about materials collecting is that actually doing material collecting that's based on some form of gathering encourages exploration as well, so that can be a good thing. So variety is good. Gating progress is potentially a good way of making sure that, particularly this is to make sure that players don't land in the game, decide they're going to grind up their professions to the top that they can possibly get to, get themselves the best equipment in the game by doing so, and doing it without progressing beyond the first 2 or 3 levels in the game, as relates to the combat stuff. So they not only do they give themselves a big grind, they also overpower themselves, and it breaks the balance of the game potentially. So a common tactic in RPGs with crafting in is to have some form of level gating, so that you can't progress too far in your progression in your professions until you actually also level up. And World of Warcraft, I don't know if it still does, but when I used to play it, did this, and you only got a certain amount of available points in any profession at any uh, 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 for your level. And if I remember rightly, it went up every 5 levels. I might be wrong in that. Apologies if I'm misleading you. But the principle is that they tied the possibility of progress in the crafts, what they call them professions, to the actual RPG game level that you're at. Okay. Another way of helping uh, discourage grinding is the concept of diminished returns. So you may have heard the phrase, and you may understand what this means, but let me explain. Which is that when um, when somebody gives you an ice cream for the first time in your life, then this is an amazing thing, and it's the best thing ever because this incredibly wonderful tasting thing has come into your life. And then when you get your second ice cream, it's almost as good and brilliant. But by the time you get to your 100th ice cream, especially if they're all in the first week that you've been given ice creams, then uh, you don't get so much of a kick from that. You're kind of getting used to it. And it's this idea that when things come round, again, the impact of them is less each time. That's called diminished returns. So it is often used as a principle in games in various ways. And there are a couple of ways in which it can be used in crafting systems to help uh, combat some of the grindy aspects. So one of them is if you've got a targeted XP system, some kind of system that rewards you for making things by giving you XP in that profession, which then helps you progress through. It would not be unreasonable to say the first time you make a belt buckle, that gives you a certain amount of uh, uh, metalworking XP. The second time, it gives you almost as much, but every time you make one in the future, it keeps dribbling down. And this is probably some kind of inverse square curve in my head, so that it may never dribble down to absolutely zero, or it may do. It might come to the point where you're not going to learn anything more from making belt buckles. So the way that this helps avoid grinding is that it means that you can't, it's not as effective to just say, right, I'm going to make belt buckles. I'm going to make 3,000 belt buckles, and that's going to level me up for what I want. So I don't need to do any more complex thinking. I'm just going to get into this grindy routine of doing this. So you avoid it with this diminished returns in the reward, and also it makes logical sense. And I love it when gameplay and logical sense actually come together. In this situation, it's basically the first time you make a belt buckle, you're going to learn a load about making belt buckles because it's a new experience. The second time, you might learn some more, but as you keep making belt buckles, slowly the amount of benefit you get from making another belt buckle becomes less and less. So the diminished return effect is real for real life making things, and also it helps in the design of games. The other way you can do diminished returns is price when selling. You can put these two together. Often, when players are repetitively making things, it won't be for their own use. It will be for the sake of leveling up their profession and possibly for the sake of getting money. Um, so, giving you in game currency by selling the things that you're making. And it's quite a legitimate thing to do, to be making things that you're selling. Uh, so, uh, in the same way as the XP rewards could use a diminished return way of doing things, the prices, so the amount of money you get when you sell things, could also have a diminished return. And again, this actually has a potential for mirroring the real world. If you made 1,000 belt buckles, you would not imagine that the price of belt buckles would stay static in your town, because you're what's called flooding the market. You're flooding the market with belt buckles, and so the price comes down because they become more and more available. So again, it's an easy one to justify. What else have we got? Yes, I guess the final thing is the problem with grinding is that grinding is kind of the connotation is that it isn't fun. The more you can do to make your crafting fun, then the less it feels like a grind. And the video that in the series that I've done, that is just before this, which has got design thoughts, outlines some of the ideas of how crafting can be fun. So I'm not going to reiterate those. Okay. So that's been an exploration of the nature of grinding for crafting systems in games, and I have come to a temporary stop to the videos that I'm making in this particular suite, but there will almost certainly be more at some point in the future, so I can still say that's it from me for now.